Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Women and Young Members Excellence Committee of the ICAI, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to Yashaswini and Idol Series 90. Yashaswini and Idol is a Wednesday series of program conducted by the WIMEC for the Women CAs and by the Women CAs. This series is an extension to the Sky High Synopsium, which concluded its 100 episodes. It is one of the committee's initiative to not only disseminate information to women members on technical updation and non-technical skills, but also to empower and inspire women members to come at forefront and realize their verbal skills at public forum. Today, I take the pleasure to introduce CA Priyanka Pallav ma'am. She is a chartered accountant with expertise in assurance, compliance, and audits across BFSI and diverse industries. An academic topper and award winning professional, she has been recognized for her contributions in statutory and thematic audits, regulatory reviews, and strategic banking projects. She actively reflecting her passion for knowledge, sharing, and professional excellence. Warm welcome, ma'am. Over to you. Priyanka, ma'am. Over to you.
Priyanka, it's your turn.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah.
Over to you, ma'am. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Sorry, I just lost my network a minute ago.
No issues. No
Good
problem.
afternoon to one and all. I would like to thank the Institute and the honorable designated members for giving me this opportunity to present across such a wide platform and to share the knowledge and to gain certain insights from the other members. So here we are today. I would like to send across my digital wishes on the auspicious occasion of Makar Sankranti. May you all have an abundant and prosperous year ahead. So digital, this word you all would have heard or would be hearing as of now, and it's a part of our life. It has been taken over the front seat, right? Like a driver's seat in our life, in our day-to-day chores, in our day-to-day life. It has been joined up in each and every aspect, each and every phase of our life. So does it has been joined up with the banking term. So here we are today in the webinar to gain some insights on the audit view of digital banking beyond the screen. So let's go beyond the screen. Let's see what's the audit view of the digital banking. I'm unable to share my screen. Can someone please recheck the tech support team? It's showing host disabled attendee screen sharing. Yes, now I'm able to. Thank you. Hope it is visible now. Can please someone confirm if the screen is visible? Okay. So, as I mentioned, digital is the word which has taken over the front seat in our life. So does it is associated with the banking industry. So here we are to gain some insights on beyond the screen and audit view of digital banking. Just a professional protocol, a short disclaimer before we begin with the webinar. And this is the broad agenda. What are we going to cover? What are we going to gain insights about the digital banking? Let's move to the history. Let's move to the timeline that how the banking industry in India has developed across. So the roots, the first modern bank, it was established in back in 1770s. Then came the formation of RBI, which molded the entire banking industry, which regularized the entire banking industry. Then came the formation of SBI, branch based banking, and later on the entry of private player, which was a major revolution or a major stirring point in the composition and operations of the banking industry. A move from traditional to digital banking. It's like going paperless from the paper based banking. So it's a very drastic change in each one of our life to get into the digital banking. It's a drastic move from branches to bytes. And it all started in the late 1990s when the internet banking was introduced. Then came across certain other core banking facilities such as ATM services, electronic transfers, balance inquiries, etc., which got introduced one by one. Then came the major revolution of core banking system, which each and every bank has adopted. Another major revolution was the usage or the accelerated usage of smartphones. Right now, we all have the vault, the entire bank in our pockets, the entire bank right in front of us on our laptops, on our desktops, on our mobile phones. So just imagine the magnitude at which the digital banking has reached to each one of us. The financial inclusion part. Then was the major revolution, the launch of UPI, and certain other revolution, entry of fintechs and many other products and everything that were introduced. And RBI, as always, had played a very, very crucial role in molding the entire digital journey of the banking industry. This is just a list of all the critical or all the core banking products which have emerged across the times starting from 1980s. Just imagine it all started back in 1980s time, and it is still revolving. Right now, while I'm presenting, there would be some of the other banks, some of the other platform on which a new product, a new digital facility would be introduced. So that's how fast paced the digital banking or the banking industry is moving across. So, as the from pertaining to the audit background or to the audit fraternity, we all have to equip ourselves with this dynamic and with this dynamic changing environment, digital banking environment. Okay. Digital. This word I have right now spoken a lot many times. But what are the fundamental to the digital banking? It's the 3D banking. Let's dissect it and understand what is the 3D banking concept all about. It's nothing but a three-layered phase. Any bank or any platform, any institution which has to go toward complete digital transformation. It has to go through these three stages. The first is digitization, the second is digitalization, and the third is digital transformation. Let me put it into a more banking term or in a more bank related example. Let's take customer onboarding as a banking process. Digitization is nothing but converting the physical application form of the customer, a handwritten form or hand-filled form, into a complete digital content. Means scanning it, uploading it into the database management from where it gets picked up in the banking system. Next phase is the digitalization. It's a next level, it's a process enhancement level, which comes after the digitization. And the third most important stage, which is a conjunction of digitization and digitalization, is the transformation. It's like a piece of data which is used to enhance a process in the bank, and it gets transformed across the entity, across the organization. So before we understand digital banking all about, we have to understand that it is all broken up into these three fundamental stages. Let's talk about what are the core areas of digital banking. Later on, we will move to the audit procedures or what are the major methodologies that we can adopt to perform any type of audit, be it a stat audit, be it an internal audit, not a specific audit, but I will be mentioning about the procedures that can be adopted across the different types of audit. The core areas in digital banking are the customer acquisition onboarding. As I gave the example in the previous slide, it's related to digital account opening, eKYC, non-face-to-face onboarding, etc. It's a area in which a particular customer, be it ETB, NTB, the existing to bank or a new to bank customer, is being onboarded, is being acquired. Second area is the core banking services such as balance check, passbook, mini statements, fund transfer, bill payments, etc. These are the different facilities which any bank provider is giving to the customers. The third area is the payments and transfers, which is the major or the most important chunk is the UPI BIM integration. We all are using UPI like anything. We are using it every minute of our daily routine, each and everywhere. QR based payments, cardless ATMs, digital wallets, digital lending and credit products are very important, since it is all related to my schedule 9, the advances part. Because through this area, the bank is lending, is giving loans, giving credit products to the customers. So it becomes a very, very crucial area when we are auditing any digital bank journey, because it is directly related to the advances, it is directly related to the credit giving capacity of the bank, such as instant personal or retail loans, digital credit cards, buy now, pay later facilities, and many more. I have just listed down very uh, known or very important or crucial areas, but there would be hundreds and many number of products, many number of core areas. The next is the wealth investment and insurance, like a third party products which the banks generally service into, and personalization and analytics, basically doing data analysis, tailoring the customer journey, offering certain pre-approved products, AI based insights, security, authentication, risk management. This is also one of the area where banks have digitalized their processes, support and self services within the bank, integration analytics and continuous improvements, which is integrating with through APIs, through different platforms, data sharing, where data security becomes one of the critical point. We'll definitely look into all these aspects along with audit procedures and the key risk for each and every area. So these are the broad areas under digital banking. We would have seen so many things, so many areas might have not been even listed down. The list is endless. The list is very, very dynamic. It is changing every now and then. So as our audit procedures have to be. Now let's talk about the main audit objective and the framework around it before we get into the procedures and the key risk that we are going to cover. We have to ensure that the entire digital banking journey is compliant with the regulatory guidelines, whereas RBI, IT Acts, NPCI rules, etc., are coming into the picture. We have to ensure there are adequate controls over the entire digital journey. There are adequate framework, there is adequate monitoring done by the bank. We have to make sure that our audit procedures are linked with these objectives, because this is the end result that we want to ensure that everything is adequate, efficient, effective. Evaluation of data security, customer protection, and fraud risk. Because with digital banking, the banks are directly interacting with the customers. They are collecting very sensitive data of the customer. So data security becomes the top-notch topic, or the most important or crucial topic when we talk about digital banking, because everything is available digitally, everything is available from branches to bytes, as we saw in the previous slide. Everything is available beyond the screen. So it becomes very important that how the security is ensured for such sensitive data, such customer centric data. Validate the end to end digital journey integrity, that what is my entire workflow, what is my entire work process. Assess the operational resilience and business continuity, basically the entire framework around the different processes or different products which the banks bring into for the digital banking. Now we get into a detailed understanding of each and every area, that what can be considered as key audit procedures and the key risk to address those key risks in a particular area. Digital customer onboarding, the most prominent and most important process for any bank, and be it any kind of area. Whenever bank has to acquire a customer, has to provide any services, the bank has to first onboard a particular customer on its system. So that becomes very crucial, because in the stage of onboarding, there will be lot of critical data collation, critical data collection from the bank, analysis of those data. So data security becomes a very key risk. Identity fraud, As we all know, there have been n number of cases of KYC, PAN, etc. All these sensitive documents, the identity fraud happening through all these documents. Even those these are the government documents, still there are so many instances that we have heard across the market. The second risk area is the non-compliance with KYC norms. The third is the data leakage, as I talked about the data security. Because if a customer is being onboarded on the bank system, it becomes the responsibility of the bank to take care of the data of the customer, to make sure that there is no misuse of that data. Generally, what happens, that there could be instances that if this data leaks out in the market, it is stolen, then the customers, again, it will turn out into any fraud risk, any kind of identity risk, etc. So data leakage is also a very key risk which has to be controlled. Incomplete due diligence. It's more of an operational risk that any procedure which the bank would have set up, it's a key risk that you have to address, that there is a complete due diligence done for the customer. There is no incomplete stage. There is no particular step missed out before the customer is taken forward in the journey. We understood what are the key risks for a digital customer onboarding area within a digital banking. Now let's talk about what are the audit procedures that we need to follow to address this key risk. Process workflow, approvals, documents, alignment with business. What does this mean? We have to understand the entire end-to-end workflow. Now, this particular audit procedure is not just a key audit procedure only for digital customer onboarding, but it has to be followed across any area. So this will be like a common audit procedure. We have to understand at a broader level that what is the workflow, what is my end-to-end journey, what are the different phases in that journey, because everything is happening beyond the screen. There is nothing physical on the table. There is nothing that is in front of our eyes or it is tangible to us as an auditor. Everything is an intangible journey. So we have to first understand, not in a technical terms, but at least at a broader level, what is the workflow, what is the entire end-to-end journey. With that, we will be able to link this key risk with a particular workflow. Every bank, every institution will have its own different workflow. Higher or bigger the bank, more complex the systems would be. Smaller the entity, more simpler the systems would be. More simpler the workflows will be. It all depends on the business size, business composition. So for us as an auditors, we first need to have an understanding of the entire workflow, that how complex it is, how simpler it is, and what are the, and we have to break that journey into different phases. Then we have to look into the approvals. For any type of journey in a bank to be introduced, there is a approval process defined from XYZ departments, from XYZ units. It depends bank to bank. So it's a common protocol. Anything new to be introduced in a bank, in a very sensitive industry like this, there has to be approval. So as a key audit procedure, understanding workflow, understanding the approval mechanism, understanding the documentation of the journey. Since everything is going to be an intangible journey, the replication or the architecture of that entire journey, that what is the first step, what is the point in time the customer is going to interact with the bank system, when the customer is going to input the critical data, the PAN details, other details, date of birth, etc., demographic details. It's very crucial to understand that what are the stages, how minutely it has been documented. Nothing can be left as an open box. Once it is left very overall basis documented, it becomes very difficult to challenge that if something has been rightly approved or not. Let's take a very simple example. A normal customer onboarding journey, which is being documented at a very broader level, say stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and this is the stage 4, and customer gets onboarded. But what are the very minute parts in it? For example, the landing screen, when the customer is going to click on a particular terms and conditions, what are the terms and conditions that will be displayed to the customer? What will be the disclaimer that will be mentioned to the customer? Any error message, any timeout error, any kind of technical error because of which the journey gets disrupted, what would be the message passed on to the customer? All these aspects, the very minute, very finer aspects of the each phase has to get documented, has to get approved, has to get designed in such a way, and then the journey has to get developed. Because documentation becomes very critical, just as it is applicable to the auditors. If not documented, not done, the same applies the other side. If it is not documented correctly, it becomes very difficult to decide the onus, to decide the responsibility. So, as a key procedure, understand the workflow, understand the journey, understand the approvals mechanism, and how it is documented. And another important or a very fine area of gap across different entities: alignment with business. Say, for example, a particular entity which is providing a XYZ nature of services, whether the entire onboarding journey which has been documented, whether the development is happening according to that documentation, whether there is a gap or there is a disalignment between what has been decided earlier, what has been developed, and what has been finally disbursed to the customer as a particular onboarding process. So it becomes very important to have a sync amongst all this. It could definitely happen on developing any particular journey is not an overnight thing, that today I draft something and tomorrow there is a completely new product on the table. It definitely takes a lot of time, lot of efforts, lot of teams involved in it. So there could be some changes over the time, some developments over the time, depending on the market condition. So it becomes very crucial that there are ratification approvals in place to support such kind of workflow. UAT, CUG, PVT. These are like the three stages for developing any journey. UAT is user access testing, CUG is closed user group, and PVT is post verification testing. So UAT happens when the journey is being, it's like a demo testing, like dummy details being created, demo customer details being created, nothing on the live customer data, and that is being tested, that whether everything is happening in sync. So that is the first stage. The second stage is the CUG, in which a very close group of customers, very selective live customer data is being shortlisted and selected to test it. The third is the PVT stage. It's like testing after going live. It's a go live testing basically. That after, say today, any particular digital journey has been launched by a particular entity or a particular bank, it has to be frequently monitored, it has to be frequently reviewed. We can't just keep any particular journey open ended, or 6 monthly or a annual review or a biannual review depending on the complexity. So we as an auditor, we need to understand the internal process for all this testing, because we as a, say as a start auditors, we would be auditing quarterly or at an annual frequency, but we need to understand the internal process. Speaking from the other side, the internal auditors, they will be heavily involved with all these phases. So from an internal audit perspective, also we have to take care that how these stages are being catered. The third is the control testing. As I talked about earlier, that on each stage throughout the journey, lot many risks are there. There should be different controls. Say, for example, to prevent identity fraud, to prevent data leakages. So, what is the nature of control that is addressing this risk? It's basically risk control mechanism. Whether the bank, while developing a particular journey, has identified the key risk, has identified a control to address that risk. That is what we have to test. Regulatory compliance for XYZ journey. Say, for example, the journey is about onboarding the customer or a re KYC journey. Let's take a very classic example. Since it's a re KYC journey, the customer gets a link on the mobile or on any device and they have to just click it, they have to do their re KYC. It becomes very important that RBI's KYC guidelines have been complied while developing that journey. There are very finer and minute para regulations which are given, which needs to be taken care. So in all, these are just the very broader level procedures which I mentioned, which you will see that it overlaps across my different areas as well, because everything is about a digital banking journey. Be it any specific area, everything ends up with being digital. So the procedures would be overlapping. just a finer tuning across different areas. So here we complete one of the areas, which is digital customer onboarding. The second area, as I talked in the earlier slides, digital lending in credit journeys. A very, very, very important aspect in a digital banking, because in this, the bank is lending, the bank is giving credit to the customer. It is building its asset side, it's building a schedule 9. So it becomes a very core area for us as an auditors. While we do the audit of schedule 9, while we do the audit of advances and NPA, we need to take care the digital aspect in sourcing and disbursement of this credit products. What are the key risks? There could be gaps in credit appraisal. Since it's a digital product, since it's a digital journey, there is very low level of manual intervention or manual underwriting that could take place. So we have to understand that how is the credit appraisal happening, what are the potential gaps in it. Model risk, I will take this up when I'm explaining the audit procedure. Regulatory breaches, which is a very common risk, be it any digital banking area, and data misuse, using the customer's data from this area to that area, or leaking that data, misusing it. These are all the key risks. Audit procedures, the very first and foremost step is the loan origination. So when we are auditing any particular credit product of the bank, which is a digital product, we need to see the end-to-end workflow, starting from the onboarding or the loan origination status, till the disbursement. Between the origination and disbursement, there will be different stages. As we talk about the next point, that is policy. Policy team in any bank will frame an overall governance structure, that okay, if I'm giving a personal loan, if I'm giving a home loan, what is the framework, what are the different rules, what are the different policy parameters that should be applicable, that makes a customer eligible for taking a loan from the bank. So the audit procedure should be, if there is a product, if there is a digital product, it has to be in sync with the policy. Nothing can be developed which is overriding the policy. Policy becomes the master thing. Nothing can be overriding the policy. There is a concept called taking deviations, but nevertheless, it cannot go beyond the policy framework of the bank. So, reading out the policies, reviewing the policy, how frequently it has been taken care, it has been disseminated, all that needs to be taken care of. All that needs to be part of our audit procedure. We review the credit policy, we understand the digital product, we understand the nuances of that particular product, we understand how that policy framework has been developed into the particular journey, how the policy rules, say for example, loan not to be given to a particular bracket of customer, or the age norm, say below 18 years, or minor customers, uh, in case of salaried person beyond retirement age, which are very common norms, credit norms. All this are defined in the policies of the bank. Product wise policies are defined. We need to make sure that we understand it thoroughly, and we take into consideration those while testing particular products. Model governance, a very unique, or to say a very transforming area, because initially how the loans were given, manual underwriting, just checking what is the past track, xyz things, and the loan was either given or not given or rejected. Model framework is like a very high level framework, or it is a high level governance in which the banks develop internally such scorecard ratings or such risk rating models, in which customers data is being pulled from the bureau, is being pulled from the CIBIL, and the demographic details is pulled from different sources, the liability details are pulled from different sources, and all that is combined to to give a different rating, to give a different risk rating to each customer. Say, let's take my example, my demographic details with XYZ Bank. I'm already an existing customer. I already have a loan product with the bank. I'm going for another loan. So the bank will have such a model. It will pull all the data. It will evaluate all that data, it will run through the business rule engine, BRE. It will run through it and it will give a scoring. Say Priyanka is in the score of 1 to 5, which is a good score, or is between a 5 to 10 score, which is a little badder score if I have some defaults in my CIBIL appearing or in my bureau in some other institutions. So model becomes a very dynamic area because each bank, each institution will have a completely different model. You cannot apply the audit procedure or the way you look at a model of a particular bank to the other institution. For that, you need to understand what's happening in that bank, what is its framework, and how it is being implemented in the journey. So understand that how this model governance is being done, because that is directly related to model risk, failure of this particular framework, the model framework. Because RBI is picking out this particular area, model governance, as a very key area in its past communications to different banks. In its public statements, that banks have to make sure that they are not disbursing a lot of unsecured loans basis this models, basis this pre-approved models, because it was increasing a lot of risk, a lot of credit risk on the banks, because models were running in such a aggressive way that everyone was competing to give more loans. So that was creating a more stringent check on the models of each and every bank. So as an auditor, it becomes utmost important for us to take care or to look into or to review this particular area. That what is the framework, what is the policy document of that model, what is the internal mechanism for the team, for the bank's team to review this model on timely basis, how the model is being rebuilt if there are some issues in that particular model, how it is rebuilt, how it is launched later on. All these aspects, finer aspects, have to be taken care. Then comes the disbursement controls. Very classic issue, if we can say, is double disbursement happening. Mistakenly, two times disbursement is happening to a customer. So that's a very common failure example of a control, that there is no disbursement control. That if it is triggered, it has to go only once to the customer's account, or incorrect disbursement being done. Say it has to be done for 1 lakh, but due to some manual error, due to some control failure, only 95,000 has been disbursed. A very classic example I'm giving, a very hypothetical example. So this could be the issues that could happen in the disbursement. There could be other n number of issues. So we need to also look into the disbursement side, not just that loan has been sanctioned, but how the loan has been disbursed. And the next point is on the regulatory compliance, as always, because as we talked about digital, everything is regulated. The next area is the digital payments area, which majorly has my different digital products which the bank has, digital cards, then we have the debit cards, etc. All that UPI, all that comes into the digital payments bucket. What are the key risks here? Payment frauds could happen. There could be some duplicate transactions that can lead to some customer grievances. There could be some regulatory non-compliance of the UPI, NPCI regulations. So all that has to be taken care through audit procedures, understand the NPCI compliances, how the payment transaction monitoring is happening at the bank level, how the reconciliation process. When we do a UPI transaction, it becomes very quick. Within a second, the payment is done. It's like I scan the code and the payment is done from my bank to the vendor's bank or to my friend's bank, etc. But we don't know that what is the entire infrastructure behind that UPI payment. Two different banks are involved. NPCI as an intermediary is involved. How the settlement happens. Paisa to within a second goes from my account to the other person's account, but it is not the live reflection. What actually happens is a day-end settlement at a bank level, at a network level. Network as in the Visa, MasterCard level. So all that are very technical, very critical parts that we need to understand when we are talking about the digital payments. How the bank is doing the monitoring of such transaction, how they are reconciling the entire payments. As I talked, day end process is there to reconcile all the payments, bank level, network level. How is that entire process documented? How is this entire process reviewed? Are there any gaps in it? What are the controls, the limits placed for this payment area? Dispute management. Say, for example, I mistakenly do some UPI transaction, or due to some mishap, my UPI has been, there is some issue there is some fraud which happened. My card has been misused. So it's a customer grievance. It's a dispute that I am saying that I am not the person who did the payment, but how it will be proved? So, what is the formal mechanism of the banks to take care of such customer grievances? How to prove that whether it's a legitimate, it's a non-legitimate? There will be a complete framework, approved framework to know that how to resolve this particular dispute. There could be a dispute that I was shopping on the XYZ website through my MasterCard network card, say any XYZ bank which has a MasterCard thing. Now the payment, it is showing approved from my end, but it does not reach to the merchant. It is not showing paid to the particular website. So that also becomes a kind of dispute. So how all this nature of disputes are being handled? So all this becomes very critical for us to understand as an audit procedure. Then how do we take care of these areas? Up till now, just to recap quickly, we talked about the customer onboarding process, be it any area, how a customer will be onboarded to different sections, different products of the bank. Second most, we talked about the digital lending, the credit part. Third, we talked about the liability part, the digital payments part. Now we talk about the fraud risk, data and information security. As I repeatedly mentioned about the data security, because customers' data is very crucial, very very important, very sensitive data. It it's the bank's responsibility. Since the customer has handed over the details to the bank, it becomes the bank becomes this a safeguarding person or the locker of the customer's data or the vault of the customer's data. So here, what are the key risks? That there could be some system manipulation, some failures, mule accounts, a very common term that we have heard about, that how the money laundering happens through these mule accounts, unauthorized access, data breach incidences. All that are the risk, the key risk in which can hamper the data security, the data integrity of the customers. Now, as an audit procedure, what should be our oversight? We have to oversight the fraud risk assessment, that how the bank is identify different fraud risk in different areas. What is the frequency of such assessment? The next important procedure would be the monitoring system. Banks will definitely have some transaction alert, transaction notification system within its environment, which will keep on triggering on daily, weekly, monthly basis some MISs, reporting of different MISs, which will give if there is any exception happening, if there is any uh, issue that has been occurred. Then we have to review the policy, the access control, and the third party vendor risk, because third party is involved in any kind of integration. The data security has to be ensured, because it should not directly go to the third party which is involved by the bank. The next area is a mobile internet banking application. Different applications that we use, we are well aware of it. Majorly common audit procedures on this area as well. We talked about very specific audit procedures, where the different key risks, but yes, the fundamentals remain the same. We have to also ensure we are in compliance with the standards on auditing and the audit assertions and procedures, which are the base, the fundamental for any kind of audit. What is the next phase? What is the evolution to revolution? Agile, secure, customer centric digital banking. The more easier banking is made for the customers, the more difficult it becomes for the auditors. So, as an auditor, as a third line of defense, as a person external to the bank, we have to make sure that everything is secured, everything is in place, everything is efficient, effective, and integrated. Use of AI ML, we have heard a lot many things about how AI ML is taking over in different aspects. Similar way, banks are also adopting this. Open banking, finance, rise of super apps, integration with APIs, dominance of UPI, growth of neobanks. There are n number of things which are evolving, revolving, and that's the next phase. The reason to put up this slide is to make us all aware that how the digital banking is moving ahead and what could be the scenario, say, I will not talk about a decade's timeline, but a year, a 2 years timeline, that what things could change. So how well we have to get ourselves equipped. That brings me to the next key takeaway point, that is learn, unlearn, and relearn. Learning what are the new technologies, new tools. Unlearning is to letting go of any outdated practices, the within the box thinking and the checklist driven approach, and relearning ourselves, re-equipping ourselves with the modern technologies and with the developing phase, which is the out of box thinking. Here, I would like to conclude my webinar with the key takeaway that we have to keep ourselves updated. We have to be, the 3D banking, digitalization, digital transformation. As an auditor, even we have to keep on transforming our knowledge. We have to be proactive. We have to learn, unlearn, relearn. We have to adopt all these things to move ahead to audit the particular areas. Thank you so much for your patient listening. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I see Khyati Pichadia here to give a vote of thanks for today's session and the first session of today's webinar. So, yeah, thank you, CA Priyanka Palo, ma'am, for giving such a wonderful session and enlighten us too and all the participants. Now, just let me check for any questions are there. I think no, there is no any questions for this session.
Okay. Thank you so
Yeah,
much once again.
thank you, ma'am. Yeah, over to Sneha Patil.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Shall we move ahead for the second session? It's BI with AI. Am I audible?
Yes.
Business intelligence with artificial intelligence. Brief profile of CA Rashmi Radhika. She is the chartered accountant with 9 years of experience in FP&A and financial reporting, budgeting, and P&L control access across investment banking and infrastructure sectors. She specializes in automations, Hyperion implementation, and ethical use of AI in finance. Thank you. Over to CA Rashmi. Please carry on the session.
Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction. And again, great job by CA Priyanka ma'am for the beautiful session that she has conducted. So thank you so much again. And with this, let's start. So the presentation is in such a way that if you all can, join me through, it's a hands-on practice session on BI with AI. Okay, so I would request everyone if they can, join me and, start working around with it, whatever prompts and everything that we are discussing, that would be really, really helpful for you all. Okay, so that's my request. Let me start by sharing my screen. Yes. Everyone can see the screen?
Yes.
I'm audible and visible.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Before starting the presentation, just a quick check. I don't know if I'm able to understand, but how many of you have already done your AICA level 1 course?
No.
Okay. So I would highly, highly recommend all. Sneha, can you? Yeah. Thank you. I would highly recommend every one of you to please attend the AICA level 1 as well as level 2 course, which has been given by ICI at a very, economical cost. So I myself have been practicing AI. It's been more than 9 months, and I have started creating my own dashboards and my own apps through agentic AI. And all this has been, possible because I attended AICA level 1, and the course fee is really, really, economical and affordable. So I would request and urge everyone to please join in for that session. That will absolutely change your perspective about how AI is, changing our worlds in finance. But today my topic is business intelligence with AI. So normally, as a CA, we are always been told that we are very good with numbers, right? But we don't have that business edge. So every time we are working as a CFO, right? We have the very good numbers. And what are the key drivers which are, resulting the numbers, but every time we have been asked the business related questions, we got stuck, right? So that's why AI is here. I would say AI has done a very important role, which is decentralized of knowledge, right? Earlier we didn't. So if I have to do some VBA coding in my, MS Excel, I was not able to do it on my own because I didn't have any coding background. But with AI coming into the picture, now I can do vibe coding or AI assisted coding, or I can create the dashboards on my own. Similarly, if AI is there and the entire decentralization of knowledge is there, why not leverage that, and why not build the business intelligence through the artificial intelligence? That's the entire point about this session. Um, so let us first understand what is the traditional BI and what is the AI BI, okay, as I would like to call it. So traditional BI, again, traditionally what we were trying to do, 80% of time is being wasted on the analytics for data cleaning and preparation. Now with the help of AI, you can do it much, much, much way faster, right? So I would urge everyone, those who are doing it manually or through, some offline sources, I would request you. Again, ethical use and responsible use of AI is equally important, but we'll see how we can, track that. Okay. So 80% of time is wasted in the traditional AI, 10x speed boost. When we are working the same work on AI, it is 10x faster than the traditional AI system. Now, on an average, 3 hours is the average delay that we are doing because of the traditional workflows that we are using, not leveraging the AI, right? So everyone, please shift to the AI BI. Again, here uh, uh, the distinction has been given, the timeline has been given, the performance gap, traditional AI versus AI driven BI, right? So in traditional BI, what is happening? We are taking week 1 to extract the data, then maybe, cleaning it. Then week 2, we are creating the dashboard figuration. Then we are doing manual analysis. And then lastly, we are doing the reporting and review. But if we see the AI BI timeline, you will see the tremendous difference. So minute 1 to 5, see the shift. In traditional, it started with week 1 and week 2, and we all have gone through this. I myself have been working with multiple banks. So I started my journey with Tata Projects, then moved to Citibanks, So earlier, as a finance background, working for FP&A team, we used to take weeks and weeks. Here also only 1 or 2 weeks, but we used to take weeks and weeks to extract the data because finance systems and multiple systems are not at all easy, right? And you have to download data from multiple sources and then apply it, and then identify what all information that you should be having in the dashboard, and then you will do all the manual analysis, and then finally your report will get prepared again, which will be iterated multiple times basis the CEOs or CFOs, right? So AIBI timeline, again you can see the shift. So minute 1 to 5, automating data ingestions. Minute 6 to 10 is AI powered analysis. That is complete. Minute 11 to 15 is insights delivered conversationally. Conversationally, as in nowadays, with the use of natural language processing. Hope everybody knows about NLP, right? With the simple plain English, now we are able to do so many things. So even in dashboard, we can get the insights through AI which have been delivered conversationally. And within 16 to 20 minutes, the decision is ready with all the recommendations and the action points, right? Most of the time, what we do is we prepare the dashboard, everything is fine, everything works good. But ultimately, what is the use of that dashboard that we have created, right? We forget somewhere while working on the dashboard, we forget the main reason why we create it. Suppose if you want to create an expense dashboard, right? Your purpose is to cut down on cost by looking at the expenses, not just having the dashboard. Just having the dashboard is not working for you, right? Your purpose is to cut down the cost, looking at the expense, drilling it down to the lowest level, identifying why the cost has been increasing or why there is a cost leakage or cost gap compared to last year, compared to last quarter, compared to any given period, and then take necessary actions. That is the point which has been forgotten while doing all this analysis, right? So AI is there, and through AI, what we can do is everything can be streamlined into the steps so that not even a single process is being missed. Um, Moving ahead. The paradigm shift from dashboards to decisions. As I already told you, just preparing the dashboard won't help you at all, right? In old BI approach, if we have seen the static dashboard logged in time, right? Because it's a static dashboard. Every time your numbers are changing, right? Your actuals are upgrading day by day. So old BI has the static dashboard, manual filter requiring expertise, right? Suppose if you want to see a particular region, you have to select a particular uh, region, and then in the entire dashboard you will have to select manually, right? After the fact reporting on post events, past events, so suppose some events have been occurred, right? So that kind of fact reporting is missed in your old BI approach. Soil data requiring multiple logins, right? If you have the some kind of data error in the traditional BI approach, you will not be able to identify it, and it will require multiple logins, multiple iterations for you to understand, and then correct your mistake, and then you will get the final output. In AI driven BI, what is happening is it is conversational insight on demand. Okay, whatever you need, you can ask, and your AI driven BI is giving you everything on the go, right? Predictive and prescriptive analytics, right? Predictive as in, suppose if you have some kind of data, past data, you can ask it to create the predictive analytics for you. Decision ready outputs instantly, right? As we have already seen the and compared both the timelines of traditional BI and AI driven BI, right? Unified intelligent data layer, right? So what it creates is, suppose if we have created a dynamic dashboard through Power BI, nowadays, every single technology is evolving so fast that, catching up with it is getting more difficult and difficult, right? So Power BI has the co-pilot feature. If I don't know if everyone is using Power BI, right? But it has a unified intelligent data layer. So suppose if you have introduced some data to it, right? It will automatically start analyzing the patterns, right, in your data. And suppose in your last line, you do not have any data, but it has been written as the data ends here, right? It will automatically through the pattern of above data, it will analyze that this line is not in the pattern and immediately gives you the error that this in this line the data has not been given, so it will give you the null error, right? So through AI driven BI, you can already cleanse the data and do the wonders. Now my point here is to make you guys aware about all the tips and tricks that we can use, right, as a CA, and we can get the hang of business analytics. Okay, so first tip is ask data like a CEO. We are CFO, we have been CFO, we will become CFO. Agreed and accepted. But sometimes you will have to have that business angle. And that's why whenever you have been in such a situation that you need to answer your business details, right? What you can do is you can ask like a CEO, which is, right, entirely working on the business analytics, right? So the prompt has been given, and the objective is reveal why higher revenue destroyed the profit. So suppose in this example, maybe let me give you hope everyone can see my Excel sheet as well. Hello. Hello. Excel sheet not visible. Just 1 second. Share entire screen. Yeah, can you all see the Excel sheet now? Yes, and presentation is also visible, right? Both simultaneously. Okay, okay. Thank you, Ashok. Now moving to, so what I have done is I have created some very small data points. Okay, so as you know, it will quickly, give us the output and the specific prompts that we want to give in order to understand that business intelligence level. Okay, so what I will do is, so here is the data. Which has been given quarter 1, 2, 3, 4 revenue, cost, and profit, right? As a CA, you can see revenue is dipping, cost is increasing, profits are decreasing, and all these things, right? But now we are with the lens of CEO. Okay, so let me just copy this and maybe paste it to any of the LLMs that you are using, be it ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, Meta AI, and whatnot. Okay, maybe we can start with the Gemini. Okay. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm just pasting. Okay, before we do this pasting, let me show you one clear thing. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. So everyone must have used Google AI Studio, right? One of the key feature of Google AI Studio is whatever you are writing here, suppose I'm writing something over here, right? In 2 seconds, you can see the number of tokens which has been used in the prompt that you are giving. So can you see over here the 12 tokens, right? So now tokens will be the new digital currency, and that's why we have to vouch for how many tokens that we are trying to use. Okay, so suppose if given in this particular thing, rather than copy pasting the data, okay, now if I do the snip tool, okay, and I'm just, so every time what happens is every image that we are getting, we are sending it to the chat GPT or LLM, right, without even thinking how many tokens they are using. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm just clicking a snap out of it rather than copy pasting it. Okay, so I have created the snap, I've just copied it, going to the AI Studio, and now I am pasting it. Let's wait for some time and let's see how many tokens have been used. Can you all see 1081 tokens have been used just for one image? And that's the difference between structured data and unstructured data. Structured data is something which you are directly giving to the LLMs in the form of row and columns, right? Unstructured data is image, which is very hard to analyze, and that's why it is taking extra tokens for you. So I will request everyone that whenever, if without sending if the work can be done, please do that for every small task. Just don't click the photo and send it to your LLM, because in future, nowadays everything is free, so we are enjoying. ChatGPT Go has come up with their free version, Gemini already giving free version, Perplexity has that Airtel user base, so we are using it uh, um, you know free of cost, but soon they will be charging so much money from us. So we also have to be very careful about how many tokens that we are trying to use. So just a small reminder on the, so 1081 tokens. Now what I'm trying to do is I'll just quickly close this. I'll just copy this, okay, and then paste it. Now you can see how many tokens have been used. Sorry, not in the image. 1 second. Oh, it is automatically taking it as a image only. Just 1 second. Suppose if I copy paste it like this, it has taken only and only 64 tokens, right? And that is the difference between the structured and unstructured data. Now, by default, whenever I'm copying this, automatically it is taking as a picture, right? So again, if you see, the tokens have been increased. Now, from the CEO angle, right? Now, when I run Control Enter, now the model is working. And the prompt is asking, you are advising the CEO, not the analyst. Ignore accounting explanation. See, we all are well versed through the accounting terminologies, right? But what we want to understand is the CEO angle. So now, if you see in the prompt itself, I have mentioned that ignore accounting explanation, using only this data, explain in plain business language why Q3 performed worse than Q2 despite higher revenue. List no more than 3 reasons. See, everyone must have heard about prompt engineering. See, before starting all these things, these are the basic points that everyone has to learn. All we have to do in this age of AI is learn the prompt engineering, right? So I will give you the simple four way through which you can create an optimum prompt. First is give the persona, right? Here we have given the persona like you are advising the CEO, not the analyst. Then we have given some context, right? Some context here it has not been given, but generally whenever you are creating a prompt and you need the optimum output through that prompt, you will have to give some context. Then the task. So task has been clearly mentioned. List no more than 3 reasons because this it needs to be given to CEO, right? So you cannot give multiple data, right? And a huge data set. It has to be concise enough for the CEO. Rank them by impact and end with an uncomfortable truth management may resist accepting. So looking at this data, tell me one uncomfortable truth management may resist accepting. Now, if we see what kind of answer it has given, the growth was bought, not earned. See, this kind of language is not used by a finance person. These kind of language, if you must have seen, have been used in by the CEOs. Okay, so the growth was bought, not earned. Operational inefficiency, automatically they have been given. And one uncomfortable truth that it has given is the record sales you achieved in Q3 was a distraction. Chasing growth for the sake of volume is actively destroying the value of your company. So this is the CEO perspective, which is again the business intelligence that you can use through the. So why it works? It ignored the accounting, right? And forces strategic reasoning. As a CEO, you need the strategic reasons. Ranking, avoid noise. So if you have asked for the ranking, right? Rank them by the impact. That avoids the noise. Uncomfortable truth creates tension. As a CEO, you need to understand what exactly is the uncomfortable truth that management is resisting. Okay, hope you have understood the idea behind what we are trying to do, and we have multiple tips and multiple data sets so that you can, if you do your own prompting, like suppose given the data, just analyze the data and give me the trend, right? Compare the answer it is giving versus if you put this prompt, right? It will give you some business intelligence edge over the just the finance. So it's not, see, business and finance cannot work in isolation. They had to go hand in hand. So even here, you can see operational efficiency, which is again the financial numbers. So even in business, the finance should be included, and in finance, business should be included, right? That is what we are trying to do. Now, going to the next point. AI creates KPI you never thought of, right? Most of us, whenever we are trying to understand the KPIs, what is the KPI? Your revenue, your net profit, right? Your employee turnover, all these things are generally treated as your major KPIs. Now, this is the very important prompt that you can give, right? In which it is clearly mentioned that do not use revenue, margin, or growth. Invent 3 original KPIs. Now we are asking the LLM, asking the AI to invent 3 original KPIs that better explain the long-term profitability using this data for each KPI. Then in the pointers, I have asked them to give it a name. What is the name of that KPI? Explain what it captures that traditional KPIs hide. So generally, what happens is sometimes in the race of just putting all the KPIs, right, traditional KPIs, we somewhere lose the context, right? So in the second point, it explains what it captures. Then traditional KPIs hide, right? Rank customers A to D using this KPI and state who looks successful but is actually risky. So on the face of it, it looks successful, but is actually risky. So if I go to my second one, right, there are customers A, B, C, D, revenue has been given, returns, discounts, and service cost. Everything has been given. So now again, I will copy it. And again, you can choose your own LLMs. Suppose if I have to do it with Gemini. So I'm just pasting it and pasting this prompt, which is very specific, if you see. Now let's see. Friction to value ratio. See, all this kind of details, we were not able to get it if we didn't have the business intelligence lens. What it captures, this means how expensive a customer is to satisfy before they even touch your service team, right? Consumer, there is a cost to acquire a customer. CAC is really high. The hidden risk, consumer C looks like a powerhouse because they have the highest revenue of 2,50,000. However, their friction ratio is staggering 40%. That means even before going to the service team, the cost provided, the cost uh, associated with customer C to acquire that customer is really, really high, which is somewhere close to 40%. They are likely renting products, high returns, or a discount addicted, right? Then service burden efficiency. See, these kind of analysis, this kind of ratios, which we didn't even heard. Everyone knows about the yield, right? But the service burden efficiency ratio. So this kind of KPI it has created basis the customer, right? Customer D has been given rank of 14.07, then B has been given 13.75, then 7.75, and so on. And third is retained equity quotient, okay, which is revenue minus whatever cost that has been associated divided by your revenue, right? So revenue minus whatever returns, discount, and service cost has been added. Basis that the ranking has been given. So in all the KPIs, if you see BDAC ranking has been given, right? Here also, here in service burden efficiency, DBAC. So A and C are coming last again. Here again, if you see BDAC, right? So A and C is coming as the last, and hidden risk is by the customer C. So this kind of analysis is given by using this particular prompt. Hard bans on common KPIs. So somewhere we don't want all the KPIs, the all the old traditional KPIs of revenue, margin, growth, expense, and all these things, right? You want something new, some freshness. Then ranking exposes illusions, right? If we have seen in this data, customer C is giving you the highest revenue. But if you analyze the returns, discount, and service cost, the friction cost is really high. Now, this kind of analysis again is given in business intelligence. Naming gives executive legitimacy. Now, once you add names against the your analysis, it gives the legitimacy. Okay. Moving on to the third tip. One-click root cause analysis. Why root cause analysis is very important. Most of us are doing reconciliation, right? Reconciliation is key part of our financial reporting as well as regulatory reporting, right? So in regulation, one of the key part is root cause analysis. If we don't identify and do the root cause analysis, the chances of happening that error again is way higher than if you do the root cause analysis, right? So in this, what we are trying to do is, here if we see root cause, the data has been given region wise: sales, marketing cost, logistic cost, and defects. Okay, defects that have been identified. Now again, if I read the prompt, assume sales numbers are a distraction. Now the focus has been shifted from sales to other KPIs. Okay, because first thing that we see is the sales, right? If the sales is high, cost is low, again a good thing, right? But there are few things which are beyond your sales, which are beyond your cost, right? Treat this as an operational failure investigation, right? In the prompt itself, I have seeded it that it's an operational failure. Identify the single region most likely to destroy profitability over time. Like even in next 5 years or 10 years, right? A particular region that will destroy your profitability, and explain exactly why using cause, mechanism, and consequences. So here we are trying to understand the root cause analysis. So identify the cause. what is the mechanism, and what will be the consequences if not corrected, right, as early as possible. Do not mention revenue in your final answer. See, again, I have shifted my focus from revenue. So again, if I do a new chat in ChatGPT, pasting this particular prompt. If you need, I will share all these Excel sheets and the prompts details with you, so that if not doing simultaneously over here, see here, if we see, all the numbers have been pasted, not in the image form. Can you see automatically? This is the CSV, comma separated value, as we, generally use it. So now I'm just pasting it. Cause, mechanism, and consequences. Cause is the South has the highest defect rate, which is 7. Now the focus. So in the entire solution that it has been provided, it will not talk about the revenue, as strictly restricted by me. Okay. The mechanism, high defects trigger rework, right? Multiple times if the defects are coming. So this is again giving you the business angle, right? How the operational part of a particular business works. And the consequences. So cause, mechanism, and consequences. Persistent quality failures force continuously rising operational spend, while trust erosion increases future cost per customer. Over time, this region, which region? South region, if we see, right? In the South region, if we see, the number of defects is very high compared to all the other regions. The region becomes a structural cost sink, where every unit sold carries escalating hidden failure cost, steadily destroying long-term profitability, even if top line volume looks strong. So even if we see for South, the sales is pretty good, 2,80,000, right? Then marketing cost is again a little bit on higher side. Logistics is also again on the little bit higher side, but the defects which has been mentioned is the root cause, which will erode your profit over the long time. So everything is given in this particular prompt, so that it will analyze and give me the desired output. Now, tip 4, which is dashboard that talk. Okay, auto narration. Now create a board level storytelling, not commentary. So most of the time what we do in variance analysis is compare one data to the other, right? And we chase the product teams for the commentary that why this happened, why this happened. Now, if you see the prompt, write a 90-second boardroom narrative, right? This is giving you the exact instruction to the narrative. 90-second boardroom narrative based on the dashboard. Structure it as what looks healthy, what is quietly deteriorating, right? Day by day, what is, decreasing in its value. And third, what will become a crisis if ignored for 2 quarters, right? End with one decision the board must take immediately, right? So the prompt is, very optimized. Every single thing that I want is mentioned in here. Now, again, going to auto narration. What is the data? Metrics have been given: revenue margin, customer churn, and operating cost for current last month. And risk flag has also been given. And that's why we can term it as a dashboard, because risk flag has been given, right? So what again I will do? Using again ChatGPT. If you want, you can use, because it is taking lesser tokens compared to others. So whatever pointers that I have given in my prompt, see, the LLM is working for me in the same direction that has been given. So multiple times what we do is we send one prompt, then the output is not desired. Then again, we reiterate the prompt or change something in the prompt, right? So my point is, while you are giving the prompt, why not build prompt in such a way that it gives you the desired output in one go, right? And for that, again, I have not started learning everything from the day one, right? I have done multiple iteration and created my prompt library. Now, again, if you go to your institute's AICA website, there is a prompt library which has been created by institute and all the members who are the participants, right? So if a similar kind of problem exists, you can just directly go take that particular prompt library, because few things, if the prompt is optimum, then it will give you the desired result, right? See, it has given me what looks healthy, what is quietly deteriorating. Beneath that growth, the economic engine is weakening. Margin has fallen sharply from 22% to 18%. Now it is also giving me the financial number as a backup or as a evidence to what it is trying to explain me. So now it is a mix of both business and finance. What will become a crisis if ignored for 2 quarters consistently, right? This is a very key actionable points that it is trying to give me. If this pattern continues, we will enter a classic growth with erosion trap. So growth is happening on the one end, but erosion is happening on the other end. Revenue is still rising, but profitability is collapsing. Higher churn will force even more marketing and sales spend. Cost will keep compounding and margin will compress further. Immediate board decision. See, in just 1 or 2 lines, it has given the board decision. The board must decide now to prioritize margin and retention over pure growth, specifically approve a company-wide cost discipline and customer retention program, right? It's the same customer retention ratio should be increased, even if it means slowing revenue growth in the short term to protect the long-term profit engine. So in one line, it has given us uh, uh, the output. Okay. Now, moving on to tip number 5, forecasting without statistics, right? Again, so the idea is to understand all the business narrative and the business aspect. And that's why we are keeping the very obvious part out of the prompt. So forecasting without statistics. Now in this, it's very interesting. The objective is to make forecasting emotionally credible, not mathematically impressive. So see, if we have created a particular data model, definitely it will give us the forecasting in a given way, right? But here the objective is to make forecasting emotionally credible, not just mathematically impressive. Okay. So the prompt that has been given is, again, if I go to tip 5, forecasting. So simple month and sales data has been given, January month, Feb month. If you see, there is a increasing trend except for the June. Now, I will use this time maybe Perplexity. So in Perplexity, you can choose your own model. Okay. That's the benefit of using Perplexity. It is really good for research. Now, without the statistics, right? See, the forecasting is happening. So sales for July, August, and September are forecasted at 169, 176, and 183 respectively, if you see, right? Because I asked it to forecast the next 3 months of sales. Do not explain formula or models. Instead, explain where confidence is high, where it is fragile, and what assumptions could break the forecast. Use language suitable for a non-technical CEO. Okay, so this is what is mentioned in my prompt. And now if you see, it is giving me the high confidence areas. The upward trend from January through June gives a solid ground for expecting continued growth into next 3 months. Average sales hits 1,44,000 per month. Fragile areas, April dip. Now, basis the data that you have given, it will start analyzing. In this example, only revenue has been given and month has been given. So now it has only revenue option. to analyze the data. And that's why everything is based out of revenue. Key assumption: continued steady demand without major disruption such as economic shift or supply problems underpins this outlook. So otherwise, if we see, the trend is going good. No big seasonal swings beyond what's hinted in these months, and the linear path holds without sudden changes. So if there is not much of economical, political, or other kind of shifts that we are expecting, then we will be able to achieve this 1,69,000, 176,000, and 183K for next 3 months. So it has given the key assumption, which if breaks, then the entire forecasting will go for a toss, which happens anyways. Whatever data modeling, whatever forecasting that we are trying to do, right? It will anyways, if a particular, the key assumption, if that breaks, entire modeling is gone for toss. Okay. Now, why this work? It removes the math theatrics, adds risk thinking. It has added the risk thinking and it builds the trust, because you have told, the LLM has given you the specific reason, specific key assumption, basis which it has created the forecasting. So it builds the trust. Moving on to tip number 6, which is instant what if simulation, right? We have multiple times in our Excel or through Power BI have done what if simulations or what if analysis, right? Here, what we are trying to do is, if you see, the data that has been given is scenario of base, increase or decrease. So base scenario, then increase, and then decrease. You must have seen the best case scenario, worst case scenario, right? If we remember in our what if analysis. So in base, price changes are 0%, revenue is 50 lakhs, and profit is 12 lakhs, right? 1,20,000. Let me just Alt HK. I don't do comma because I was, about to send it to LLM. So maybe I should remove the comma, because comma again adds to your tokens. Okay. So base, increase and decrease. Now compare the price increase and price decrease scenario, because in what if analysis, what we do, the base case, worst case and best case scenario, right? So compare the price increase and price decrease scenario. Ignore revenue growth as a success criteria. Again, see, अब आप बोलोगे रेवेन्यू के हाथ पीछे हाथ धो के क्यों पड़े हैं, राइट? रेवेन्यू इज द की ड्राइवर. We all understand that, but we want to understand little more from the data, right? Revenue is a key focus. Everyone is trying to work around the revenues. We need to understand the other areas, right, which are being ignored, right, which are being forgotten. And that's why every time, even in LLMs, they are biased, right? Whatever LLM that you are using, they are biased. So once they see the data, quickly jumping to the revenue, quickly jumping into the profits, right? And that's why in the prompt itself, we are mentioning again and again, ignore revenue growth as a success criteria. Explain which decision increases strategic risk and why. Management may choose it anyway. End with one sentence warning. Give me the warning, right? Now, again, so let me use, suppose Gemini is also mentioned, right? So let me use Gemini here, right? And then this particular prompt. Now again, in this what if analysis, right? It will give me the comparison of base increase and decrease. The strategic comparison, price increase scenario, 8% hike results in profit of 90,000. 5% cut results in profit of 1,10,000. This is for price increase and decrease. The strategic risk in the case of price increase, and it has explained it through the price elasticity, if we remember, right? In elasticity of demand that we have studied in +2, right? And in CPD as well. Why management might choose it anyway, right? Revenue optimization over value. the premium trap, the hidden cost masking. Warning is prioritizing a 4% revenue gain at the expenses of 25% profit loss creates a fragile business model that will likely fail during the next market contraction. So it is giving us the clear warning that we are prioritizing a 4% revenue gain at the expenses of 25% profit loss creates a fragile business model, right? So if market contracts, the immediate effect, if you remember the sensitivity analysis, right, the scenario analysis, this is what we are trying to do, the price elasticity of demand. Would you like me to calculate the exact price elasticity of demand, right? So again, revenue is not the focus area. Price increase or decrease has again become the key area. Now it removes obvious metrics, right? Again, forces deeper strategic thinking beyond surface level revenue numbers. And that's why in the prompt you have seen this. Reveals behavioral bias, as I already told you, right? Your LLM is also biased, exposes to why leaders make risky choices despite knowing better. Now leaders know, despite knowing all these things, right? They will still choose to continue with it. Then warning line lands hard. So something which has been written in a warning, right? It hits hard to your head and heart. And that's why creates memorable impact that drives decision making urgency. Again, everything is about the prompt. It exposes the trade-offs, not just the outcomes, right? Now, moving on to our next tip. AI finds problem that you didn't look for, right? Which is anomaly detection, right? Few things which we as a CA or we as a data analyst, we cannot identify. We can maybe, but it will take us much longer time than the AI, right? So in this tip 7, what we are trying to do is here, if you see days, 4 days data has been given, sales has been given, and cost has been given. Now with this itself, we can see that on day 3, the sales number are 0, right? So what again here we are trying to do is scan this data as if you were responsible for preventing silent losses. Again, it is trying to tap to the uncharted areas, identify one anomaly that would escape dashboard but matters to cash flow, right? Which can be skipped in the dashboard because in the dashboard we are showing all the traditional KPIs. So specifically mentioning it that this anomaly, identify that anomaly which would escape the dashboard but matters to the cash flows. P&L and cash flow, two different concept. Explain why it is dangerous even if it happens rarely. Okay, so again, copying the data and maybe again perplexity, right? And here again. Now it is thinking. Now, first step, day 3 shows 0 sales. That we all saw, okay? Creating a silent loss of 25,000, right? That dashboard might overlook if they focus only on sales trend or daily totals without profit breakdown, right? If you see over here, you can say that on day 4 there is a 0 sale. Okay, sometimes that happens, but the cost is 25,000, right? This is being missed. Why dashboard miss it? Standard sales dashboard highlighting the strong upward trend from 40,000 to 45,000, right? From day 1, if you directly jump on to day 4, you can clearly say that the sales has been increasing in the increasing trend, you can say from 40,000 to 45,000 across other days. Masking this isolated 0 sales event as noise. Profit metrics often aggregate weekly or roll up positively from profitable days, hiding the full hit, right? Selective reporting, as we call it, or recency bias. We all have heard about all these things that happens in the real life as well. All the scams, all the frauds that we have, heard and we have known, everything starts with window dressing, as we all know, right? Inflating your profits unnecessarily. So again, cash flow danger, this fixed cost outflow. Now again, see, even if your revenue is 0, your cost is 25,000. That means this 25,000 is fixed cost, right? I didn't give it any single thing, but it automatically built the relationship, right? That even if without sales, the cost is there. That means it is a fixed cost element has been captured, right? Then the fixed cost outflow drains cash reserves immediately, even on non-revenue days. That is the kind of cash flow danger it is trying to give us, right? So that was about the anomaly detection, right? So mostly if using our financial intelligence, what we would have done, that sales is 0, right? But we wouldn't have identified that fixed cost element with just this particular data, right? And that is where the business intelligence with AI, excels. Now, focuses on rarity of risk, even if, see, in the prompt itself, what I have mentioned, even if it happens rarely, then also tell me why it is dangerous. Encourages foresight, right? Again, as a board manager, as a CEO, CFO, you should be having your foresight on the numbers as well as in the direction in which your company is going. Avoids obvious spikes, right? Whatever spikes which have been seen, but it is avoiding the obvious ones. Moving on to the very important dirty data to clean analytics, right? Now, again, so these all are just very small example that I'm trying to give you. Okay. You all can think the multiple use cases that you are, maybe experiencing on day basis and create your own prompt and do the business analytics through AI very conveniently. Now, in this case, the customer name, if you see, first is R Sharma, Rakesh Sharma, R Sharma, right? This is a very key pain area every single person is facing, right? So, what happens is while creating the data, we don't remember, we don't do it in a structured way, right? And at the end, suppose year end, and you want to create and consolidate a particular file and create some kind of dashboard out of it. Now, the uniformity that you lost while creating the data is a key pain area, right? Now, in this example, if you see R Sharma, Rakesh Sharma, R dot Sharma, now again, Sharma is written in caps, right? Now, we want to do is, I will take Gemini and just look at the prompt. This prompt is designed very beautifully, okay? We will discuss just 1 second. Right. Clean this data, but more importantly, explain every assumption that you have made. Right? This is really important because sometimes we say, right, artificial intelligence is not that intelligent. It's the human that we have created, right? We have created it, not the other way around. So AI may be wrong in some kind of assumptions that it has taken. And we all must have heard about the AI hallucinations, right? There are multiple ways through which you can reduce this type of hallucination. But here, what we have tried to mention is explain every assumption you make and identify one risk if your assumption is wrong, right? If you put this single line in whatever prompt that you are trying to give, right? And the last one, even more important, respond as if your logic will be audited, right? Again, one more check that we have put on the LLM, that your logic will get audited. So extra burden, extra validation we have already put on the LLM, right? So that whatever it does with a responsibility, right? Ethically, not just anything that it may hallucinate. Now again, And these are the very basic feature of LLMs that we are trying to use. We have not even touched the deep research, right, or the connectors or any other tools, right? We are just using the normal chat GPT, right, the latest version, the thinking model, right? Now, in this case, to clean this data for an audit ready report, we must address the obvious redundancies and inconsistent formatting, right? It has highlighted. Below is the cleaned data. Now, what it has assumed, R. Sharma, and Rakesh Sharma is one and the same. Rakesh Sharma, Mumbai, it has consolidated the sales. Anita, Delhi, it has. So, Anita was only one line item, right? So, audit trail and logic, right? When processing this data, the following assumptions were made. First is entity duplication. R. Sharma, Rakesh Sharma, R. Sharma in caps are treated as single unique customer entity. Now, this is the assumption that they have taken. It may be correct, it may be wrong also, right? But at least understanding this assumption, asking the LLMs to give you the assumption sheet is really important for you to cross check whatever output the LLM has given you, whether it is as per whatever the true knowledge that you have or not, right? Because ultimately it's an AI. It will always need the human intervention. Okay. The risk, if these represent three different members of the same family or business partners with the same initial, your sales concentration risk is severely understated, right? You would be treating three independent revenue streams as one, potentially miscalculating customer lifetime value or credit limits, right? Again, assumption two, geographic normalization. Mumbai and Mumbai. So one is then in the small cap and right. So MUMBAI and M is caps are treated as the same geographic location. The risk in some global ERP system, lowercase designation can occasionally refer to sub-district, right, under Mumbai, but sub-district is Mumbai suburb, right? In some cases, even the slightest of risk that can happen has been highlighted in this. Now, third assumption, if we see transaction aggregation, the logic three line items of for Sharma are assumed to be separate transaction totaling 1,50,000 rather than duplicate entries of 50,000 invoice. So now again, if we go to this data, right, we are again assuming that these three are independent transactions, not the duplication of the same invoice, since the invoice number and other details has not been mentioned in the given data, right? So again, as the auditor gives the auditor report, it gives everything. If it's a qualified report, right, or if it's a disclaimer report or adverse opinion, right, everything has been mentioned very clearly. So similar to that, if you see, it has mentioned every single thing that I couldn't even think, right, that AI will think that this can be a mistake also, right? AI has pointed out it very correctly. This can be a mistake, right? But since we do not have the invoice number, we cannot validate it right now. But the AI has cleared it from its point of view that we have assumed this thing and then we have done the whatever to achieve the output, right? So comparison strategies, the strategic risk. Oh, sorry, ma'am. Yeah, audit trail logic and assumption also it has given, right? R. Sharma, the risk, assumption, every single thing. Okay. So that's the again the benefit of BI with AI, right? AI reasoning, not just cleaning. So AI is also giving you the reason, not just cleaning it. It is also giving you the assumption so that you can cross check and validate your data, right? It forces transparency, teaches data governance, right? Every single person, they should have their data governance, and it elevates trust because auditable reasoning has been given by the AI. Okay, moving on to the last tip that we have is from insights to action plans. Again, in the start of the presentation, we discussed that somewhere in the process of building the dashboard, what we do is we forget the action plans, but AI will never forget it, right? So here, what I have tried to do is, again, tip number 9, action plan. Insight has been given impact and urgency, right? The data set is developed in such a way so that it can give you the desired output again. But in your real life, your data can be very different, and there can be huge number of rows and columns. High discounts hurting margin, impact is very high, urgency is immediate. Then South region cost spike, high, immediate. Watch category, high margin, medium, and planned. Zero sales day, cost lake, high and immediate, right? So this is the data set. Again, copying this data set and pasting it here, or maybe let's open one more AI, Meta AI. Okay. So that we'll, just look at the Meta AI version as well. So this is our prompt. This is the data, and we will again discuss the prompt in detail. So Meta asks you the year in which you have born. Maybe. Here's a 90-day management action plan based on the insight. Let us discuss what prompt we have given. Convert these insights into a 90-day management action plan, right? Basis this. For each action, specify owner's role, not name. Expected resistance, leading indicator of success. Rank actions by what must happen first, not by impact. Okay. So we have also given the guideline that basis the urgency, do it, not by the impact. Okay, so if you see, few items are immediate. So we have given it the priority rule that urgency should be, catered first, then the impact. So basis, whatever prompt that we have given, now it has given the 90-day management action plan. Now, imagine with just this single piece of data, right? Just 3 or 4 liner data and a 3 or 4 liner prompt, it is able to give me the 90-day management action plan. Day 1 to 30, address high discount hurting margin. Why? Because high discount is the urgency, if you see, is immediate and impact is also high. So even if you have mentioned that urgency, you will have to prioritize. But again, 3 immediates you can see, right? Under that, if 3 are there on which impact is high, it is automatically giving the ranking that from first day 1 to 30, you should focus on this. Then mitigate South region cost spikes. Then plug zero sales day cost leak. Then day 30 to 60, optimize watch category, high margin, right? If you see, optimize watch category is medium and it is already planned, right? And that's why it has not been given the priority, right? So this was the maybe 1 second. So again, in this prompt, what we have done is we have given the time constraint, right? 90 days specifically, right? Just 1 second. Yeah. So my last but not the least action is, if you see, tip 10, which is make AI your virtual analyst. So now what is happening over here is I have given it the data of products, selling price, variable cost. Everyone, please remember your old costing or AFM financial management days, right? Variable costing, monthly unit sold, fixed cost, right? All this kind of detail. And I have prepared a detailed prompt, which is giving me the HTML or, basics. Sometimes what happens is similar kind of data you will have to um, uh, analyze again and again, right? So here, basis this, what you can create is an basic HTML app, right? Which will give you all the analysis. Now, again, this prompt is little bit detailed, but I just wanted to show you what all it can do, right? So now I'm just pasting this prompt, right? And it will give me the HTML code for it, right? And those who have already done your AICA level 1, you must already be knowing what is an HTML basic app, right? So what I'll do is I'll just copy this code, open a notepad. Everyone can see the notepad. I have pasted the entire code and now I am saving it as maybe dashboard 1. Okay. Dot HTML and save it as all files. And now I'll just click on save. Now, once I click this dashboard 1, can you see what it has created? Break even analysis dashboard. It has specifically mentioned. So if you, again, the detailed prompt I'll be sharing with everyone. So what I have done is I have given the variable cost multiplier as well as fixed cost multiplier, right? So if I increase my variable cost, right, by 10%, then automatically if you see this chart, which shows the total revenue and total cost, automatically changed. Even if you see your break even BEP units, this is also increasing. So whatever range that you want to give to it, you can give even the fixed cost multiplier. Suppose if the fixed cost is decreasing, total fixed cost, if you can see, has moved to 80,000, automatically your BEP units, break even point units have been decreased. So this is the power of BI analytics with AI, through which even if you are not well versed with Power BI, but you can still create your own dashboard. Okay, this detailed prompt I will be sharing with you all. And just one last thing that I have to say is, even though AI is there to help us, but ethical and responsible use of AI is equally important. Please do not disclose any confidential information that you have directly through AI. Try to build the offline. So this HTML app is an offline app. So even if internet is not there, right, I can check that if my fixed cost is increasing or my variable cost is decreasing, what it impacts my contribution or unit contribution or maybe total revenue or cost, right? So ethical and responsible use of AI is equally, I would say, more important than using the AI for business analytics. With this, I will end my presentation. And one last thing that I always say, that even though AI is there to help you all, everything, AI has all the superpowers, but that human intervention. So AI, BI, but CI, which is CA knowledge, which is equally important. So even if you are using your AI with BI, but CI is equal or more important. So you will have to use your CA knowledge and then you will get the desired out. Thank you so much for your time. I thank everyone from the Institute for giving me this opportunity. And let me know whatever questions that you have.
Yeah, on behalf of everyone, I sincerely thank CA Rashmi Radhika for the wonderful session on BI with AI. The session was extremely insightful, practical, and very relevant in today's business environment. Your clear explanation of how AI can enhance decision making and reporting made the topic easy to understand and highly impactful. So, thank you for sharing your valuable time. And I'll just see if there are any questions. Just allow me a second. I'm not able to see any question asked yet.
Okay, no worries. If you have, maybe I'll share my profile and details with the institute and you all can reach out to me. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you,
you so much. Yeah.
Radhika. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok.